Evening, everyone. It's Wednesday, February 17th, 2016, calling to order the Board of Selectmen for the town of Hingham. Don't mean to be abrupt, but we want to stay on cue. Okay. No minutes at this juncture. As we ordinarily do, questions from the public regarding items not on the agenda. I don't see anybody, so we'll move on to a discussion of the articles. First, Barbara?
Tax work-off.
Okay.
This is Article
Barbara,
X.
How are you?
nice to see you again.
Welcome. Thanks. You want me to just go ahead and start, Paul? Sure.
Absolutely, the floor is yours.
Basically what we did is we went back and took a look at the law, and there were some changes in the law about a year and a half ago. And in looking at the law, the way it had changed would be much more beneficial to the property tax work-off people, because we can increase the number of hours that they work within a given year to a max of 125, and tie that to minimum wage, which would up the threshold for fiscal 17-18 to $1,250, 125 hours at a minimum wage of $10. And then next year, when minimum wage goes to $11, we would do the 125 hours at $11, again upping the threshold that they were able to earn within a given year. We thought that made a lot of sense to do, and in so doing that, that's why we proposed the warrant article. We also thought it would encourage more people to participate in the program.
Questions from my colleagues?
Barbara, how many people currently participate, both doing the work directly as well as, I know town meeting adopted a program a few years ago where somebody could designate a surrogate, for lack of a better word?
Currently, we have only one person that does surrogate. Last year we had two. The other person dropped out because of some changes in their trust in their house. It made that person no longer eligible. And last year we had 39 people participate in the program, and we're running at about that this year.
And just since we are on camera tonight, for the benefit of people who might be interested in learning about the program or potentially being considered, how do they go about doing that?
They should contact Kathy Glenzel, who is the outreach coordinator and coordinates the program. There's an application process. There's not a strict income guideline, but we try and really look at people who meet the circuit breaker income tax guideline for the state, which is roughly $55,000 to $60,000 for a couple, around $40,000, $42,000 for an individual. People have fallen above that a little bit, and again below that. They would need to complete an application. We would look at their skills, and we would look at the available jobs that have been posted within Town Hall or where some of the Town Hall departments need.
And one final question, if I could please. Do the applications, is there typically one application period in the year, or is it ongoing?
We try and open it up at a certain time during the year, but it is ongoing. So, for example, if someone came in last November, because for this current fiscal year, all their hours needed to be completed by April, and they had skills that we were able to match with a particular position opening, we would bring them on to tax work-off. If they didn't complete currently the full 100 hours, they would get a credit prorated based on the number of hours that they had completed.
Thank you very much.
Just one question. In terms of the age requirement, I know you said this income, is there also an age?
This current program is 60 and older,
60 and older.
And Hingham actually has 4 slots for 60 and under that the town has generously wanted to offer that to under 60 people.
So there would, if there were folks that were under 60, there were 4 slots available, as long as they meet the income guideline?
Yeah, and they would talk with Betty Foley about that.
Sure, great, thank you.
We've had a little difficulty
Yeah.
filling those, though, correct?
I think I found since the economy's turned around, that's where the difficulty has come in. Prior to, say, 2012, 13, people were actually filling those slots.
And we put that in at that point in time, I think, to address that demand. And I think it was at 9 or 10 that we put that in. And it was used heavily during then, but I think, as Barbara says, during economic times, that'll mitigate it. Do you use the under 60s slots, that funding for over 60s if no one files the...
We do,
Okay.
we do. And again, we saw some drop-off in the program when we had to have people fill out W-2s and file taxes based on their earnings.
Are we ready for a vote? Somebody make a motion?
Make a motion to the town amend its acceptance of Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 59, Section 5K, by adopting the 125-hour maximum limit or take any other action thereto.
Second.
Discussion, hearing none. All those in favor? Aye.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for all the great
so
work you
much.
do,
Thank
Barbara.
Thank you.
Okay. Article DD, Lincoln School Apartments, capital requirements. Mr. Ellison, good evening, sir.
Good evening.
How are you?
I'm not sure how much Ted is going over this with you, but we have the article in front of you. We put a number on it. I think this all was prompted by a capital needs assessment we've done in the last, 4 or 5 months. So we got the information back, and sort of we decided that sort of to move forward with this, we needed to get some money from the town, borrow some money. And Ted, we've gone through with Ted a schedule, and I think figured out some sort of interest rate. And that can obviously be decided at a later date. And so that's the article in front of you. The chairman can't be here tonight, so I'm filling in for him, but I'm not sure where you want to go. Do you want to ask questions?
I can give you, I've given each of you somewhat of an overview, but I think for the public and for you as a collective body, Lincoln School Apartments, which we purchased about 9 years ago, I believe now.
Yeah, it's 2008, right?
And we purchased this by floating bonds to cover the acquisition cost plus a capital needs assessment at the time. And they've gotten to the point now, 9 years in, where the value of the building is much more than it was when we purchased it, but their capital needs are, I seem to look at it like, if I look at the next 10 years, I don't know which ones of the years are off the top of my head, but it's like 3 of the years they're fine, but 4 of the years they have problems because some of their projects are larger in scope than the cash flow is allowing on a year-to-year basis. But over time, which gives them the ability to repay it, they can manage this. So this is a little bit of a cash flow issue for them. We are going to provide, into this article, a sum of money that they can draw down upon and adjust the lease payments back to the town to allow for repayment of those funds at a schedule that won't impact their capital plans, and at an interest rate that is tied to our borrowing costs, since essentially we're just letting them use the money that we have in our savings account at all times, rather than have them go out to the public market and pay interest costs, which just further drives up their costs and pushes their capital needs further away from them.
Yeah, and I think it just, I think one of the issues with the purchase was that we floated bonds for 20 years, I believe. And I think in a product like this, which is affordable housing, the way it's priced and the returns you get, if you talk to Cochran, who manages the property, who sold it, it should be longer, 30 years, and that allows the principal to be lower. It's not the interest rate that's hurting, it's the principal payment. So if you look at the math of where we are, 60 units, we get about $20,000 a year. Again, that's the rate that we get from the government. Obviously, the people in there are paying less, or depending on income levels, so it's $1.2 million in revenues. Operating expenses are about $500,000. So that's $700,000 of sort of pre-interest depreciation taxes, NOI. And the ground lease and the taxes are about $600,000. And this is the budget that we have for the so, and of that, about $550,000 is the lease payment, which is the interest and the principal, and the rest is taxes that we pay. So we have about $100,000 this year, maybe a little less, and most of that will go into normal depreciation, fixing the units, replacing stuff, a carpet, dishwashers, so on and so forth. And I think that longer term, the three big items we have is the elevator, the windows, and the fire alarm system. The fire alarm system is not a particularly big deal. The windows and the elevator is. One of the weaknesses of the property is that there's only one elevator. Typically in these types of units, you'll have two elevators. You'll be able to fix one while the other one's working. And in this case, because there's only one, once you shut it down for a couple of weeks to repair it, the people above floors can't, so you have to move them out of the building. So there's an expense to that. And so that's one of the things that we're going to be orchestrating, through the next couple of years. Because if the elevator goes, people can't get up and down, because you got to presume that people need the elevator. The windows are, they're old, they're not leaking. If we repair them, that will save some energy costs. But that's, that you'll do in time, and that's not a particularly big deal. But the elevator is something that we have to be mindful of as a town to make sure that thing is running, and it's just going to be expensive to orchestrate all of that. So that's, what we're kind of up against. But I think fundamentally, the goal in real estate is that, you own it for a long time. That's when you start making money, because you pay off the original debt, and then you can relever. And so let's say in 10 years we decide to borrow $5 million. We're not going to need $5 million, so that money can either be used to, build another building or give it back to the town in terms of a payment. So this is really the long-term goal here. But again, the property, it makes money under the sort of affordable housing process we have, and we just went through a thing with the state and the federal government to get a bump in the rent, and you can do that every 5 years, and so we petitioned to do that. And that requires you to go out and get all of these, different comps, and then of course they come back and give you a number. So the good news, the economy here has been strong, the rents are higher, and so they're comping you higher. So let me leave it there and see if there's other questions.
Is there a time? Well, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead. No, I'm going to, after you.
Gary?
Go ahead.
Is there a time frame on the elevator repair?
Well, the elevator is working. It's really a long-term maintenance upgrade. Yeah, I think it's not the money as much as the orchestrating the process. Not, again, Cochrane knows what they're doing. They've done it before, but that's going to be something that we have to accomplish but we don't have a timetable. The elevator's working fine. The issue is that we can't let it go for another 10 years without doing this. So
I think that's an important thing to note, because I think last year the board was hearing some different things about the condition of the elevator, and so the issues that the elevator have been fixed. They're mostly, as I understand from David, controller-type problems.
Right, it's electronic. There's nothing physically wrong with the elevator. It's just, I think they were, to be a little blunt about it, I think the committee has been uncomfortable spending money because they didn't have a lot. And so they just kept sort of band-aiding things, and I think some of the new members, including myself, says, no, we've got to upgrade this to current standards, and if it costs a little money, that's fine. Again, we are making some money, meaning $100,000 isn't nothing, and we have about $200,000 in cash, so there's plenty of money to spend $25,000 to make sure the elevator works. That's not the issue. The issue is that, down the road, you're going to have to, it's going to be a process to get these people in and out of there, and the windows are going to be, you're going to have to take units offline to replace the windows, and that's going to reduce your revenue. So that's something that we'll deal with down the line. But again, it's not, I don't think it's anything Cochrane can't handle and orchestrate over the next, 5 or 10 years.
Would the elevator be the first thing you repair under your?
I
don't think it is.
I don't
the
think
first thing they're repairing
no.
is the capital plan. Because, like you said, it's working.
Sure.
It was fixed. It has a useful life left of it. I think you have other issues that you're addressing. I don't have the exact list in my head right now of the capital plans, but I don't think the elevator was the first.
Yeah, I mean, the fire alarm is probably the most, we've got 2 bids out, we've accepted one, we just have to get back, and, it gets down to this minutia of who's going to, service the fire alarm system, and how much is that going to cost per year, because everybody's thinking, a couple $1,000s makes a big difference here, but that's and we've had, the fire department visit and tell us what we need, blah, blah, blah. So we've gone through the process. That'll be the first thing we'll do. But that's already in the process. It was going to be done whether we did this or not. So that will be fine. We're working, I think this month, we're replacing all the lighting, all the lights in the building to upgrade them to, whatever it is, LED or something like, whatever. And that's about a $15,000 thing, but the payback's 2 years, and that doesn't include the money we're going to get from the light company to help us fund the cost of that. So there's a lot of things we're doing. I've been there many times, and the building's is in pretty good shape. I mean, that's not the issue. Is not the state of the building. I mean, the units, there's 60 units. They're not all in great shape, but that's the process. You upgrade them, and that's part of where this money's going. That's again that $100,000 in profit, or has already in it the expenses of upgrading these units as we go through the years and ahead. So and that's been ongoing. So again, it's a real estate transaction. There's a lot of expenses, but there's a lot of revenue, and you just you work it and you work it and you work it. And the game here is you take on a lot of debt and then you pay it down, and then every 20 years or 15 years you have a big payout, and then you lever it up again, and then you wait 5 or 10 or 15 years and then lever it up. But the value is always rising a little bit. And the idea is the first time we took out $7 million, but we didn't get anything because we had to buy it. The next time we'll take out $7 million or something like that, and either give it to the town or just not take it out and just have the extra revenues to give to the town or something.
Give you a lot of flexibility.
Or maybe we'll buy another.
Being able to expand the facility and not having to, ask the taxpayers for money to do that. Be able to do it from a self-generation within the facility.
Right. So again, you're paying, almost $600,000 in principal, interest, and taxes annually on this property.
So, finish? Yeah. Okay. Just so I'm clear on the dollar figure.
My understanding was it was $1 million.
Up to $1 million, right? Yeah.
Well, it has to be an exact dollar amount because you're actually taking it from available reserves and, providing it to them. However, as you know here, this will be a drawdown, so you're not giving them $1 million, and then they will draw down from it, and the lease schedule will get adjusted based on that drawdown, so their rent payments will go up as they draw down that money.
Rent payments for who will go up?
The rent payments for them,
no,
the ground lease to the town between Lincoln School, and there will be no change in any, the rents are set by federal law, so there's no change in any of the residents in there. This is just the relationship between, how this came about was Lincoln School was going to go to the credit markets and borrow independently. So for them to go to the credit markets and spend borrowing costs plus, issuance costs plus an interest rate that is considerably above what we're earning on the money that's sitting in the bank, and they're us. We're the same entity. It didn't make a lot of sense. And so this arrangement allows the board annually to release money from the fund to Lincoln School to adjust the lease payments, future lease payments coming back for that, and to set the interest rate that you'll charge on an annual basis, which we've indicated would be the cost of our borrowing. And we'll tell you what our cost of, not borrowing, what our cost of earnings that we make on the money.
And the good news is it's set by law that this isn't to raise anybody's rent.
No,
Absolutely.
I think you're confusing the rents. The rents of
That's how we get the debt service back.
Yeah.
They can't pay us debt service back. They pay us a ground lease payment back instead of the debt service that we floated for the bonds to buy the facility.
That's good. I just didn't want anybody at home thinking when we said raising rents, I want to make sure.
No, I think you misspoke on that. You're really raising the ground lease, which is
raising the ground lease is absolutely no increase in rent payments to the tenants.
It's unrelated.
Absolutely.
It's unrelated, yeah.
So in terms of the future items, I know the elevator, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but I know Paul already asked a couple questions on it. The elevator was a very big concern of the residents, and I remember when I was probably more active in that area as a liaison the year before, it had broken down at least once or maybe twice. And so are we saying that we think the repairs that have been made up to date will be sufficient to keep it operating properly in the foreseeable future?
That's what we're hearing.
Okay.
I mean, that's what again, it's, yeah.
As soon as they fix the control panel, my understanding is they haven't had a problem since.
Correct.
The people who are fixing it, or are managing it, the elevator, the contract we have, they say it's fine.
That's good. And I think we would have heard it.
I mean, we know it's old, and we know it has a life expectancy, so I wouldn't want to suggest to you that it's going to be good forever, but certainly for the next few years, I think we're okay.
And just while we're on the subject, and I'll be brief, the windows themselves, I'd been there not too long ago, there was a presentation about windows. Are they in the process of looking into, no, not at all?
No, we've not, no. The only thing that we're actively doing is the fire alarm. The other two, I think, are you know, a ways away, which is why we wanted to make this so that we could take down pieces at a time and not be paying the full ground lease on the $1 million if we even take out that much over time. So we'll see what happens.
And the fire alarm, that we actually have bids on that?
Yeah, yes, that's, yeah.
I'm just going back in my memory from before there was an issue, and without getting into it, I'm just happy to hear that we have some bids.
Yeah, and the issue with, not to get into the minutia, but the issue with the alarm system, and to some degree the elevator, was that it hadn't been upgraded. I mean, the elevator they had swapped out the electronics in 15 years. So it's like, you know, buying a new computer 15 years later or something. I mean, the fire alarm, the system works fine. The question is they can't get parts to fix it, or they're very, very hard to come by. So the idea is, let's swap it out, make it upgrade, so we don't have to worry about that. But it's not going to make the fire alarm work any better. It's just going to be able to be repaired a lot cheaper and a lot easier. That's what we're dealing with.
Thank you.
And this a 10-year plan?
That's the intention, correct?
So in a sense, what this is going to do is this is going to bridge us to the time when the initial note is paid off.
Correct.
Which will then open up all of the different options and possibilities. So
Right.
Also, remember that their existing debt, if you remember, their existing debt is declining principal.
Right, yes.
Declining debt service, rather, it's level
Yeah,
principal. And so, you know, I think as I was talking with the trust, or the Lincoln School Apartments, rather, the hope is that the repayment terms will be able to match the decreases in the existing debt schedule. That's what we're looking to do.
And I just make 2 points. One is, when Ted says available reserve, this is unassigned fund balance.
Correct.
So what we'll, in a sense, do is $1 million of our unassigned fund balance would, in a sense, become self-restricted. So it would stay within kind of that pool of fund balance, but then it would also be drawn down over a period of time. I think it's important that we specify that. Ted, you mentioned that, you know, something about, you know, the board would vote an interest rate, the board would get updated. Is that, so after town meeting, will there be subsequent involvement by this board in?
You will have, well, first of all, only the Board of Selectmen can issue debt for the town. So we, with bond counsel, we structured this to mirror that. Okay. And we put another control in that said, since it's a drawdown, that, you know, the board should, just like you authorize the amount to go to bonds, you should authorize the amount to go to loan here. So we've put two controls in there for the.
And that'll be every year, or will that be just the one time?
It'll be every year they draw the money down. Oh, actually, no, it will be every time they draw the money down.
And I think that's
could be more than once a year.
And I think that's going to be a really good mechanism for us to kind of see how this is going. Mm-hmm. I know that when the initial lease was structured, it called for periodic reviews between the town and the Lincoln School Apartments. And I don't think we've done that for a little while, and I think it'll be good. This will be one additional thing to add to that conversation, so I think it'll be really good. You know, I know that for a lot of folks living there, the lack of available funds for capital created a lot of anxiety. It created anxiety for the board. It created anxiety for the people who live there, particularly people who rely on an elevator. So I'm glad there's something we can do to not only alleviate some of that concern, but to do it in a more inexpensive way than if you went to the market. I wasn't a big fan of that a year ago.
Yep, I think this is you know, an idea that the board came up with in the last 4 or 5 months. We went to Ted. Ted, you know, went through the process, and I think this is a way to sort of create a chance for you guys to ask questions like this and press on it, because I think it's, you know, it's an important asset for the town.
And frankly, now that our fund balance is where it is, we're in a position where we can enter. These are nice conversations to have. We weren't in a position to have them a few years ago. So again, I think our ability to do this speaks to some of the discipline that we've put in place with respect to fund balance. Would you take a motion?
Please.
I'll make a motion that the town appropriate the sum of $1 million from available reserves to the Hingham Affordable Housing Trust, which funds are to be expended by the Hingham Affordable Housing Trust to make improvements to the Lincoln School Apartments located at 86 Central Street, Hingham, Massachusetts, and to authorize the Board of Selectmen to amend the lease for said Lincoln School Apartments to provide for increased rent payments to the town in amounts sufficient to repay said appropriation back to the town over a period and time and under terms and conditions as determined by the Board of Selectmen.
Second.
You want to reference a sum of money or a specific?
Do you have a preference?
I think now it's time. This is the...
I had said $1 million.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I heard... I was reading, so I...
That was my intent, yeah.
All right.
Okay.
So we got it. All right.
I second.
Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Article J is light plant receipts. And this is consistent with what we've had in the past few years. $500,000. What else I can offer to you? This is the town's so-called in lieu of tax payment from the light plant, and it's a function of a formula based on their sales. Their sales haven't dropped, so I think it's safe to say. Just to be clear for the record, the base amount is $450,000. We've been putting $500 in here. The light plant only has the requirement, of course, to follow the agreement, and if it comes in less than the $500, we have what we call a revenue deficit. We've never had that occur. We've been over $500 for quite a while now.
Questions?
So Ted, and I know we did this before, I just want to make sure I understand it. You said the base amount is 450, and this is basically an amount that comes from the light plant to the town?
Correct. We struck an agreement with the light plant. I think Selectman Rebuffo did that about 8 years ago, because it was always back and forth where the light plant didn't know what the town wanted each year, and the town didn't know what it wanted from the light plant, and so they wanted some structure, and the structure turned out, which the town agreed to, was I think it's 2.5% of their net annual sales, with a minimum of 450. The first few years it was close to the 450. And then it's increased over time, and it's been consistently above 500 in the 510 to 520 range, I think, the last few years. So we've increased the number from 450 to 500 in response to departments that suggest maybe that we aren't being as aggressive on our revenue side, because, of course, we all know the revenue is what drives the budget. So
that's the number, the 500 is the number. Yep.
Question?
I'm good.
How about a motion?
Just a quick question on the motion. Do we need to have an amount or just read the
Actually, I know that you're reading the whole things, but in the past, the board has just simply recommended favorable action or unfavorable action, because the advisory committee is going to be making these motions at town meeting. They're not your motions. So I don't think you need to read the whole thing. Just if you want to put an amount in, and just whether you're in favor or not, so advisory knows the selectman's position. That's the purpose, really, for you.
Why don't I do this? Why don't we make a motion to have favorable action on Article J and the amount of $500,000?
Perfect.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great. U.
Yes, it's a typo. It's not V, it's U. We will try to change it on the webpage. I think this is just me. This is authorizing the town, will the town authorize but not require the Board of Selectmen to accept grants of easements for streets, water drainage, sewers, and utilities. Without this article, if the board is given an easement on someone's property, we can't accept it. We had this issue come up a few years ago on some road work, and we needed to do some work in a culvert, which we couldn't do because it wasn't our land. The homeowner, the property owner wanted to give it to us, but we couldn't. So only town meeting can accept real estate, and this allows you to do it. It does not allow you to pay for anything. So you can only get gifts.
Motion?
Make a motion to take favorable action on Article U.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
I would just mention a few years ago, I think there was talk about having this modifying this article to have it be ongoing, so town meeting wouldn't have to approve it every year. I think kind of like the idea of approving it every year. I think the advisory committee, at the time at least, was inclined that way as well.
Yes.
Okay.
Article EE.
Establish the Hingham Art Commission. Spencer, welcome.
Keep it about a foot from you.
Okay, not a problem. Hello.
Hi, Becky, how are you?
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Rebecca Wetzel, 35 High Street.
Could you explain to us what we have here under consideration?
Sure, absolutely. What's that?
I want to make sure you have a copy.
Okay, yeah, I have a copy with me. I've come up with a proposition to create an art commission in town. Currently, we don't have one, and this is a way to kind of filter and have a check and balance for public art within the town. I believe the process right now is if you have artwork that you'd like to have established on public land, the selectman who has control of the property, you have to approach them with your project, and then you guys make a determination one way or the other. And then depending on where the funding is coming from, you know, that can sometimes bring in other departments. And I believe right now you guys just kind of make a decision whether you'd like to see it or not, and that's kind of how it comes together. With my, what I'm proposing is to have an advisory, which is just like a layer below you, that's just a filter, essentially. So same sort of process, anybody can come up with any idea. They would approach us. We would just make an advisement to you and say, we think this is a wonderful idea, we support it, blah, 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 blah. You will always have the final determination whether or not you want to see this project come to fruition. We would simply give you our opinion on it. Whether you supersede our opinion or not, we would still then work with whoever, whatever the project is. And then the process would just be to see it through all of the stages. If that makes sense.
And you envision a committee of 5 Hingham residents that have an interest in this kind of thing?
Minimum of 5. Mm-hmm. And to be more specific, it's residents that have a experience in design and arts, you know, and an interest in that.
You think we have 5 people in town that fit that, or?
I can think of one.
Not to be facetious, but
I hope
okay.
so. I
right.
think there's a lot of passionate people in town about art.
I would agree. I know at least one. Go ahead.
Oh, I don't have any questions, no?
I think one thing you might have to work on here is this little bit of language, shall consist of at least 5 Hingham residents experienced in the design and arts. I just think we're going to have to flesh that out a little bit, because I think that could create a little bit of an appointment discussion for you as what is experience and what is expected of that. Like we usually use terms as architect or engineer or things like that. So this is a little bit more subjective, and I think you'll have to figure out a way to narrow that down.
Well, and if you think about the opportunity of the talent bank drawing as many people as possible, you know, I think it might also be worth considering people who also perhaps have an interest in this, because I think, you know, public art is quite subjective, what's art to one person. So I would hope that if this were to go forward, it would be done in a way where it could be open to as many people as possible who would consider volunteering their time and their talent. Ted, since I've been on the board, I think I remember one aspect of public art, and I'm just wondering, or you know, maybe Paul and Paul, is this something that comes before the board a lot?
Well, we had Shirley Rydell come in with the proposal for the boulder and the bucket
And the mouse.
down at Station and North, which I think is kind of cute.
Yep.
You know, and there was also a proposal with respect to the Lincoln statue.
Yep.
That park there, but that hasn't quite materialized.
Yep.
I'm unaware of any other.
Well, a few years earlier, it was Jackass Park.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And could you just,
How does that procedure?
Well, in that case, citizen groups came forward to the town. I think Jackass Park, though, was specifically, Shirley was part of a committee that was looking at the whole corridor of Central Main Street and trying to bring back the more historically significant trees along that corridor. And then that offshot into some of those different areas. I think the projects that you mentioned about Lincoln and the Boulder, I think, are more coming from, was it the beautification committee or some of the garden clubs in town? I know there's a variety of citizen groups in town that over the years have proposed different things for the community, and they usually have to come to the selectmen because you own the land. You can, I don't say you own, you control the land.
and how would, if the Hingham Arts Commission were to be established, would that complement the beautification committee? I'm just trying to think about existing committees that we have in place and how.
Well, the beautification committee is not your committee, so
Okay.
That's a private committee.
Okay.
You don't appoint to those below that board, I don't believe.
But I'm also just thinking about we have a committee in town, regardless of how they're appointed, that is charged with some of this work, and I
think we should talk to them. I don't have the answer to that question.
May I make a comment? I understand the beautification committee to be just that, beautification, which does not necessarily specifically art, whereas this is specifically addressing art. I think beautification is more landscaping and overall appearance,
Okay.
not public art, which this is a much narrower thresh. I guess there may be some overlapping, but...
Okay, thank you.
Do you envision this commission working internally in public buildings as well, or is it strictly an exterior presentation of art?
Well, I guess the only public space I could really think of, I mean, schools are public, but they're, you can't just go into a school to
And they're
hang
under
out.
the control of the school department,
Right.
so.
And the library would be really, maybe here in the library would really be the only two public buildings I could think of.
Well, you have a lot of public spaces.
Exterior ones, yes, absolutely. But interior, really, that the public utilizes, probably, maybe the rec center, which is part of this building anyways.
And so the process would be, I'm just trying to think about how this would work in practice. So if there was a group of citizens who was interested in installing some public art somewhere, their path would be to bring it to the Arts Commission, who would review it and make a recommendation to the selectmen.
Yes.
Before it came to us.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Would you be the proponent, or would you provide an advisory opinion only?
The proponent would be whoever comes up with the concept. We would simply just be, once it's either taking off or not taking off, depending on how the selectmen ultimately decide, then they would come back to us and we would help them through the process. Sometimes art projects are fully fleshed out and they see the vision from beginning to end, and other times it's just a concept, like, hey, this would be a cool idea. And they need a lot of direction on how to find an artist, how to fund it, site preparation, speaking to Randy about then maintenance, so on and so forth.
Rebecca, as you think about this, I think what's brought you here, and thank you for putting a petition article forward, is that I think you see a need, that this warrant article is filling a need.
Absolutely.
Could you just talk to kind of, the need that this would fill?
Sure. As of right now, I don't believe there is anyone who is, identifying the public art and kind of, I hate to use the word control, but, now that this public art exists, like, who's supposed to keep the inventory around town and keep an eye on it? It just kind of is out there at this point. Long-term maintenance, kind of keeping an eye on that. But to answer your question more specifically as to how this came about.
All right, I'm just thinking more about, I think you see that this could help advance the arts in Hingham, and I just sort of want to understand a little bit about that.
As I said, there's nothing in place like this right now, and hopefully, if people realize that there's someone to come to that can kind of help get their ideas off, rather just going to the selectmen, because you guys can give permission all day long, but where does that leave that individual who may not know how to find an artist and might not think big picture, think maintenance, think long term, think of funding, think of all the minutia that comes with having public art.
I remember when things have come to us, it's I sort of found myself at a loss for what questions to ask in some ways to make sure that things were fully considered, including not just some of the things Rebecca's mentioned, but also if you install public art in a place, then that place now has public art and it's not available for something else. Anyway, I think what she's describing could potentially make that easier for this board.
Definitely.
And the other idea is it's to create a process, a structure, and most importantly, accountability, for this piece of art that's now been created. What if it's created improperly, or if it's placed improperly, or, where does that responsibility lie? Does it lie on the artist? Does it rely on the person who brought it forward? I think to present to you guys a pretty picture of what you envision, and for you guys to approve it, and then, something show up that may or may not look like this design picture that you created. There was no process there. And in the end, who's accountable for the fact that it didn't turn out the way it should have or could have?
Sounds to me that, and it's a very good idea, obviously, and it provides a great service, not only to us as selectmen, but to the town. It's something I hadn't thought about much, to be honest with you, but now that you've mentioned it, it really strikes a chord with me.
Oh, thank you.
And no budget, correct?
There's no budget, there's no expense to the taxpayers, nothing. It's people volunteering their time. Hence, going back to, if you're experienced in the arts, you're going to know how to find artists, you're going to know about design. You can open it up to anybody, but I think if you open it up to anybody, they might not have the tool set to really know how to answer this.
Frequently what you've done, and you've done this in historical, is you designate a certain number of positions. That you got to have at least one architect, or you got to have at least one of these type skill sets, attorneys, or other things that you've done. So if you wanted to get that mix, I think you could certainly do both.
I would also say, with respect to numbers, I see that the article's saying at least 5 residents. My personal feeling is that if we have a minimum number, we should also sort of have a not to exceed. And the reason is that, sometimes committees can get so large that then you have trouble getting a quorum and other things. So I think in a lot of our committees, 5 and 7 people seems to kind of be the numbers we go towards.
I'd like to just add something.
Yeah.
One of the most enjoyable tasks that I performed serving this town was to work on the historic display in the Hingham Shipyard. And those panels cost the developer $15,000 a piece. And they're replete with all kinds of very significant data about what happened down in the shipyard at that time. But the problem with some of them, unfortunately, was that they faded. The coverings faded. And I periodically have checked that from time to time, and I just happen to know who the contact person is at Samuel's, so it was an easy enough call to make, but I think that it makes a lot of sense to have a mechanism in place for follow-up with respect to maintenance. And I also think that art can be broadly defined, and we have some plaques
Yep.
that have recently been, or at least are in the process of being struck for purposes of noting the almshouse locations. And I can see how that's displayed as something that would be falling within, the kind of advisory opinions that you envision this commission giving to the selectmen as well. So I guess any kind of visual display of artwork or history or something like that, I think it's good to have this kind of
And it's
input.
good, and it's
for
good to
that.
have an inventory of it, because I don't know that there's a master list that tells us what the town owns as far as public art. And again, to your point, public art being plaques, murals, monuments.
Right.
Ted, a procedural question. Let's just hypothetically, if town meeting were to approve this, I think some of the ideas that are being talked about here would be part of the charge of a committee. So going into town meeting, does that charge need to be specifically defined with some of the things we're talking about?
I think it does, and I think that's likely what you'll see out of the advisory committee in terms of the recommendations, and I think that's what you should lend your opinions to, however you feel about the article, to make sure that the motion, which is going to have to stipulate what you ultimately are going to have to
Yeah.
use as a criteria to appoint.
So I think some of it is sort of the responsibility of this, would be the responsibility of this commission. The second piece would be sort of what it would encompass. And I think the third thing would be the sort of process, or how the committee would work, which includes its membership, any criteria for membership, and then how that commission would interact with both citizen groups and the
Individuals.
and individuals. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So just on the numbers, Mary, I don't know if we need to have a consensus here, but I was thinking, you're saying no less than 5 and maybe no more than 9, is that what we're saying? So you give you some room to grow a little bit, and you don't have to have 9, just if there's interest.
Yeah, sure, because we don't want to have to go back to town meeting to kind of change.
I just thought those numbers might.
Yeah, I agree with you.
All right, we have consensus.
You don't have to vote this article tonight. You're hearing it, so usually you don't vote the same night you're hearing it. Advisory has liaison in the room.
Is
They're
Tom?
hearing it too. And it's in black and white.
Good thing we have plaques.
Should we vote this tonight, or would we prefer to?
I think ordinarily you don't vote articles the
Okay.
first night you hear them, and it's not a financial article, so it's not something you have to vote tonight.
Do I need to come back and present again then?
No, usually, you're certainly welcome, it's always a public meeting, but generally they don't hear presentation the second time when they...
Rebecca, I would ask that as you're perhaps, as you're working with advisory and thinking about this, so what typically happens is that we'll have sort of the motion, and then advisory crafts the recommendation. So that's a place where sometimes the recommendation's a little bit different than the article.
Okay.
Because of adjustments in the hearing
Sure.
process. I would say that before we vote on it, if there's any other information that you have or any work that you do that would be helpful to us before we vote,
Okay.
to forward that along. So, for example, if you say, I like the idea of at least 5 not to exceed 9, or I think for me, with respect to the composition of the committee, again, I understand the need for wanting some expertise in the arts. I just wouldn't want it to be so restrictive that it is difficult for people who would want to participate and could. So I think maybe before I voted it, if you could perhaps, just jot us an email or something about how we might do that.
Okay.
That would help me. And that can just be like an email to all 3 of us. If you send it to the selectman's office, we'll all
Okay.
get it.
Suggested language.
Okay. Sorry, I'm reading this. In regards to the professions, if you will, artistic professions, how many of them do you want me to designate? Not all of them, I'd assume. You want some of them undesignated.
I think we'd look to you for that. I don't want to, I don't feel like I'm really equipped to do that. I just wouldn't want a situation where we have difficulty appointing
Right.
people because the criteria becomes so limiting.
Okay.
So I would maybe ask you to give that some thought
Okay.
and come back to us with something.
Sure. Could I keep it pretty broad, like working artist? And that's
I think you're going to have to somehow figure out a definition that you'll be able to use as an appointing authority. I mean, because
Right.
working artist is, I don't know what that term means.
Right. Well, just
'Cause, I mean, I like to draw, but I'm not a working artist. Does that mean I make my living off of it, or so? I know plenty of people who paint, and they paint very nicely. They don't make a living off of it, but they enjoy it. It's how they have their hobby.
But you could be an architect formally trained, but that might not be how you make your living either.
But when we have the architect on the committees, we usually have it by their designation. They're a licensed architect. They have an AIA.
So they're in current standing.
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
So I just think whatever the selection process is going to be, it has to be defined so the public can know, and so the board, of course, knows
Okay.
how they're going to be selecting people for that committee.
And we like to try to identify these things in the process here so that we don't find ourselves, after a warrant article is approved, having questions and interpreting it in a different way that it's intended.
Okay. I deliberately left it broad as to give you guys the authority to make the decision.
So in that case, sometimes you could just be simply not a requirement, but a desire. So, you'd want people that have, an interest in the arts. Well, most people you appoint to committees have interest in that committee. So that becomes broad enough that it is in a specific position.
Okay.
I think what I'm also trying to say, though, is that, I mean, what's art to some is not art to others, and to me, like the covered bridge on Union Street, that's awesome.
Oh, of course.
So the idea that somebody who's skilled in woodworking couldn't be part of this effort, to me, is like, well, why wouldn't we want to have that in the mix?
I would want that.
Yeah, so I guess defining the eligibility of who can participate in this kind of gatekeeper role, I think, has got to be defined rather broadly.
Okay.
Because remember, too,
Expansively.
yeah,
Okay.
and remember that this board will change over time.
Right.
So while Paul Healy would say that, a woodworker is an artist and has an art, somebody else
Right.
down in the future
Sure.
might interpret it differently. So we're looking at things that will sort of stand the test of time. So if you can help us with that,
Sure.
that would be
I
great.
think Ted kind of answered it by changing the language to say, I desire, not require, and then that kind of leaves it fairly broad. Would you be comfortable with that?
I would be comfortable with language that gave us the discretion to kind of assess some of that we thought
Right.
was going to be a good fit on this and brought something to the commission.
Which is what I had tried to accomplish by saying experienced in art and design, which to me was a pretty
Sure. Yeah,
broad
no,
statement.
I get it.
I did have one question for you guys, besides what we spoke of. Do you guys have any other reservations or objections that would prevent you from supporting this warrant article?
I think it's a great idea, I just really do. We just have to, just tweak it a little bit.
Sure, of course.
I thank you for taking the initiative, that's wonderful.
Thank you.
Great.
And I would also tell you that while we typically vote, it's the advisory committee as well. And I think the benefit with the advisory committee is that you have 15 people, representing a cross-section of Hingham as well. So I would invite you to, as you're having this hearing with the advisory committee, to listen to all the questions and concerns and put that same question to the committee. I think they'll help as well.
Okay. Terrific.
Yes, James. Good evening, Mr. Watson.
Excuse me, Jim Watson, 291 Rockland Street. It sounds like a great idea.
Thank you.
I'm just wondering, if somebody used the term gatekeeper, would a group with a proposal be blocked by your committee if they didn't like it, or would you be simply advising the selectmen on the merits of the proposal?
The latter. It would always fall on the selectmen to have final say.
It's not a yes or no gatekeeper. It's an advocate for the best.
Yep. It's you would give us your proposal. We would kind of mull it over, talk it over with you, and then, advise.
Great. All these years we've had the Iron Horse and the Lincoln statue and a few major things, but
Yeah.
and the memorial outside. But that sounds good.
Thank you.
I think we all can think of some people that ought to be on your committee of 50. Or 10. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Jim.
you.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your
Great.
time, and thank you for coming forward on this.
And I'll hear from the advisory, so I don't have any steps to take at this time, just...
The advisory committee will reach out to you about scheduling a hearing date.
Okay.
Yep.
Fantastic. Thank you much for your time.
Tom Piles
Thank you.
is the chair. Great.
Okay, your next article is KK, Disposition of the Selectmen's Parcel. So this article, as you are aware, but for the public's understanding, this would allow you to develop the property known as 2 Beale Street, the Selectmen's Parcel, for an assisted living facility that would qualify under the Massachusetts law for inclusion in Hingham's subsidized housing inventory. As in the event that that was not possible, that you would continue under the existing authorization provided to the Affordable Housing Trust under Article 42 of Section 205 of 2005 Annual Town Meeting.
Questions from my colleagues?
I have spoken with the chairman of the Affordable Housing Trust, Tim White, and the one aspect that he wanted to see in this is that he wanted to see that the proceeds, an article, language included in this to talk about the proceeds from the disposition of the Selectmen's Parcel be used for affordable housing, since the designation of the property originally was for affordable housing.
Is that something that would have to be inserted?
It would have to be inserted.
In Article 42 of 2005, is that the authorization to use this property as affordable housing?
For them to develop it as single-family affordable housing, and specifically it excluded rental property.
Okay.
So assisted living is considered rental property, but we've spelled it out as not just any rental property, but actually assisted living. So it couldn't, under this authority, the Board of Selectmen couldn't develop it for residential rental apartments.
If they had gone ahead and developed the property pursuant to Article 42, would they then have received some money back from that, the sale of those proceeds?
Well, I mean, I think that's unclear. I think the original proposal was to try to leverage the $175,000 of funding they provided to create a development proposal. They hired a consultant. You guys signed the contract, and they pulled back from that. But that contract, I think they were hoping to realize at least that much money back. I think in the last project they did, they were able to do that, but not substantially more than that. So it became a net zero for them, but they provide affordable housing, which is their goal. So in other words, they're trying to do it without losing money.
No, maybe.
In this case, this is going to generate, our expectation is quite a bit of revenue. So I think you're going to have a conversation with, whether all of that is moving in that direction or a portion of that. And I think you can't really do that until you understand the parameters of what kind of dollars you're talking about.
So the insertion of that language...
I didn't, when you asked me if it has to be included, if you wanted it to go forward, yes. It doesn't have to be. That's a choice between your board and, I think, the Affordable Housing Trust. I just wanted to be fair and relay what Mr. White had spoken to me about regarding what his board had discussed on this. And I don't see it as an unreasonable position. They were developing it for affordable housing, and they want to, realize any gain off of there. But we've been talking about some pretty large numbers here, and so I think you got to, think about that.
Well, we don't know what those numbers are.
Correct.
But I also understand, I understand the position that the Affordable Housing Trust is taking.
I also have your capital plan. I understand your needs as a community. And I know each of the things you guys are struggling with, you want to say yes to a lot of people, and there's a lot of things the town needs. So, I think there might be a way to, through the development of this, to solve everybody's issues in terms of some substantial money to affordable housing, and also be able to meet some of your other needs that you had, ancillary to this.
Just make sure I understood the answer to my question. If it had proceeded as it was going to before with development of Article 42, that 175,000, if it was recouped, if that's the number you used, would that then have been at their disposal?
Correct.
Right,
Yeah.
so that the money would have went back into their fund for future development.
Correct, and that's their strategy, is to develop property in that way. They have seed money we've given them, they use that to solicit a development proposal, and then their proceeds out of the development, their profit, so to speak, is a recoupment of their money. This is going to be a little different. This is going to be a lot more, the expectation is, than just a recoupment.
And is the Affordable Housing Trust, as they're suggesting the proceeds used for affordable housing, 100%?
I think that's their expectation. So I think, you're going to have a dialogue with them.
We should probably have that dialogue before we vote.
Yes. I think you can certainly vote tonight to go forward with this part of it, because this is going to be issuing the RFP and moving forward. Well, actually, we'll issue the RFP regardless, so you have that data. I think that's one thing that there's a question of whether or not you're in support of doing this, and I think you should start to get a position publicly on that. And then the question of how are you going to utilize the proceeds. I think the two are somewhat, they're tangential, but they're also not 100% together.
I see them more connected than you may think, though. In other words, I certainly was aware of this concept, and it sounds like there's a need. I just think I might need a little more information, that's all. I'm not sure, based on what we've just discussed about what happens. And, obviously, I would like to hear a little more from maybe the housing folks as to what's going to happen. What they want to happen, I should say.
Now, it's not something you have to vote tonight. I don't think it has a financial implication. Advisory can't balance or close out the year, just like the previous article. You can certainly wait. But you'll have to determine for yourself how you want to determine that revenue split if you do. It's not something that's required, and that you could certainly go forward with that and then make that determination at a later date. So,
how late of a date can we make that determination?
Well, obviously, when the proceeds are realized, you're going to have to figure out what to do with them, right? If you don't, then they're going to revert to fund balance.
And believe me, it's a good idea, I think. I'm just a little cautious to say we'll decide what to do with the money later. People might have preconceived notions as to what we should have done with it. And if we don't factor that in somehow, it might leave people thinking that we maybe weren't as clear about things as we should have been, and I don't want anybody's misunderstanding where we were going. That's all. I think we just need to have a discussion about it and have some sense of where we're going with it.
Okay.
How would we do that if we were to do that?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't have all the answers. But right now, at this moment, I just can't. I think that's a conversation with Tim White and the Affordable Housing Trust to figure out how you want to handle that side of it. And, I guess I feel like it's in a little bit somewhat premature because you don't know the number you're talking about. If it was $100, probably wouldn't be very hard for you to make that decision. But if it's, $2 million, well, now it's a different number, isn't it? So, I think for me, I would want to know what that is before I made that decision, which I understand puts you in a difficult spot because we're not going to know what that is for several months.
Couldn't we, just a quick question, I'm sorry, couldn't we, maybe after a brief discussion with them, come up with a number not to exceed a certain dollar figure where they...
Or a minimum.
Either way, something where there's a sense where, if this is something that's advantageous to the town, in terms of dollar figures, that there's this expectation that, or not an expectation that we're going to go beyond a certain number, because obviously there are other needs in the town.
Without a doubt, you could, I probably would recommend to you something along lines like we do with the light plant, reversed, where it's a minimum, and then you share the difference or something like that in some way.
I think what Paul is sort of suggesting is that we don't necessarily want to have any ambiguity in this, because people will interpret it in different ways.
Correct.
And that could lead to problems down the road. And I think we are so appreciative that the Affordable Housing Trust is kind of willing to partner with this board on a different use of this parcel, and certainly they want to advance their mission of affordable housing. So I think before we kind of vote anything, it would be great to have that mutual understanding so that our two boards can go into town meeting both supportive.
Sure. I can work on that for you for your next meeting.
And I would also say that I think this may be a place where sometimes the warrant article language, sometimes it's hard to capture some of that, but that's where the advisory comment can be really helpful in memorializing things that don't necessarily fit into a motion. And so that's another tool that we can use.
Yep.
So that there's clarity today and
Clarity
equally
in the future.
important clarity in the future.
Absolutely.
Yes, Carol?
Just one quick question. So the revenue would be kind of split in some way, between the town and the housing trust, or what?
So Carol Meyer from the Journal asked the question of how the revenue is going to be split between the Affordable Housing Trust and the town. It's the Selectmen's parcel, and it was designated by town meeting in 2005 to be developed by the Affordable Housing Trust. And the proceeds from that development were going to go to the Affordable Housing Trust. I think the Affordable Housing Trust is correct in asking, well, that's what the last town meeting article said, so if you guys want to do something slightly different in cooperation with us, which we are going to do this in cooperation with them, that the proceeds should still go to them. And I have to, by obligation, tell you that that's their request. At the same time, I think I also have an obligation to tell you that the number is going to be a little different than the development under their proposal. And so, like I said earlier with my wider analogy, if the money was $100, you might not be as concerned about it, but if it's, a couple million, you might be a little concerned about not participating in that stream of income. So I think that's the discussion that has to be had.
If memory serves, I thought the original proposal was to determine whether 20 to 40 for-sale units could be developed on this site, and from that, approximately 3 to 4 would be available for affordable homes.
Correct. I think it was the latest proposal was 20 homes, hoping that 25% of those, or 4 of them, would be affordable and potentially 1 be a local option.
And it's that figure that would calculate the benefit as opposed to what we're envisioning now, some kind of assisted living.
Correct. So now we're looking at
All the units would count.
Correct. An assisted living facility is essentially a rental type facility for generally, as I've been told, the average age is usually in the 80s. It's not a complete medical facility, and it has much less impact on the streetscape in terms of traffic count and other issues. It's in 1 building or potentially 2 buildings, and you can fit a lot of units in a small area. And so, and 100% of those, because they're rental, would count towards our affordable housing index, provided that 25% of them within the development were affordable, 75% can be market rate. And so I will tell you that there haven't been too many of these done in the state, so this is going to be a little bit of a challenge for us. We're breaking some new ground in here to see if we can accomplish this, but the feedback we're getting from the development community is that we can do this. So I met with the Department of Community Housing and Development Undersecretary, along with Emily Wentworth and Susan Murphy last Friday, and we started the conversation about this particular project, looking to make sure that we put out an RFP that would address their legal requirements, so that in the end of the day, we have a project that meets their requirements. Otherwise, they wouldn't count.
So they'd recognize these units as part of the inventory?
Correct.
Which is less than 10% presently.
Correct. Their view is 6.3%. As you know, the town's view is over 10%.
And the number of units would be the number of apartments, is that?
Yes, and potentially on a property this size, we could put 60 to 100 units on there. It's a pretty wide range. I gave it to you purposely
I remember those
because...
numbers before, yeah.
Okay.
Questions from the public? James?
I'm just confused. I
James
thought
has-
that the trust was instructed at town meeting and planned to make almost all of the 20 to 40 affordable. I could be remembering that wrongly. You're assuming that there were...
No, the presentation that we've received subsequently is that they're going to be for sale units, and 25% of those will
the
be...
same quarters with any 40B.
Correct.
Okay, yeah, I guess...
It wouldn't be economically feasible for us to, I mean...
Oh, I know.
They're selling the affordable units at about $180,000, and the market rate units at the last one was $540,000. And I think they got 2 affordables out of an 8
Oh, you mean
market
the
rate.
house on Gill Street, right?
Correct. So just the economics of building the house wouldn't...
Oh, I agree. You know, I had the impression that they were hoping to make them all affordable and then realized that they couldn't, which is why they were backing away from that.
Correct.
But maybe they
I
wanted
think
to.
there was an advisory comment when this warrant article came up in the past. I think there was reference in the warrant to the potential for 20 to 40 units that would all be affordable.
Exactly.
And I think that's what you're remembering.
Yeah.
And
It sounded so good, I couldn't forget it.
yeah.
But then I kept thinking, if you don't have a range of incomes within it, range of rents, how can you skew it? How can you do that? And I guess they found they could.
And I think we're going to, again, as Ted said, as we start to explore this assisted living, it's the same dynamic as well. And so this is, as he said, a little bit new, but what this article will do is give us the ability, if those RFPs come back and they're attractive to the town, to start to move that forward. So this article basically gives us that flexibility if RFPs come back in a favorable manner.
So the commitment to the other project remains to a different form of a similar need.
Correct. As a matter of fact, I think we feel, and Emily Wentworth did some excellent work downstairs showing that, with our population increases and our demographic studies, this is exactly the type of housing that should be at the top of our list. And we know that there's a huge demand for affordable assisted living facilities.
The HCD came up with the continuing care regulations.
Correct.
For applying to Erickson's, but I mean, they might apply here too. Because it was like a new mixture of uses.
Linden Ponds doesn't have an assisted living.
Except this will be all assisted, not
Correct.
Not a ambulatory, and yeah, so it's a little bit different. Thank you.
All right.
Your next 2 articles are Article H and I. These are your standard annual articles to move your monies into stabilization fund pursuant to previous, I'll walk you through them each. Article H is to transfer money from the stabilization fund to reduce the tax rate. In the late 90s, we sold some municipal buildings, the school administration building, the municipal light plant, former police station. That money was deposited into the stabilization fund, and we've been using that in equal installments over the life of the debt to ameliorate the impact of that project. And included this building. The project was for this building. And that's $65,413.
Questions? Motion.
I'll make a motion for favorable action on Article H.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And Article I is to transfer $450,000 from the Meals Tax Stabilization Fund to reduce the tax rate in fiscal 17. If you remember, a couple of years ago, the tax relief proposal and the amelioration of the middle school debt was achieved by saving all the meals tax monies that we had collected for several years. And that money had been growing in the meals tax stabilization fund, and then we said that we would be using those funds, which will run out over, I believe, a 3 to 4 year period, and this is the allotment for this year. I want to be really clear, this is completely separate from the annual meals tax that's coming in, that's being used to reduce the tax rate, reduce the levy, and create unused levy capacities. These are two separate things.
Motion.
Motion for favorable on Article I.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Article V.
Road building.
Once again, we are back.
And here's where I'm coming out on road building. I'm going to make a suggestion to my colleagues. I really like this article because I think it allows us to accelerate road repairs, and I think we've heard so much from people on this, and if I think of all the issues that we've heard from people on, this is one of the ones that we hear from a lot. I'm also just kind of aware of our fiscal climate, and I will go along with, if the board wants to move this ahead, I will go along with however the board wants to go ahead. My own opinion is to ask for $1.2 million for 2 years, which what that does is it allows us as a town to stage some of this work, and what it would then require is after 2 years, we'd have to come back for the remaining, for the remaining amounts for years 3, 4, and 5. On one hand, you say if it's a need, why not do it all at once? But I am aware that we're saying no to some other worthy projects and other worthy requests, and so again, I personally prefer to do it that way, but if the majority of the board wants to request the entire amount, I'll support it.
And I remember you had suggested as an alternative, and I understand for good reasons you made some good points. I will tell you that the need is so acute and so profound in this town in terms of the roads and the conditions. I just have to walk around my neighborhood and people falling down and people getting injured and families and elderly people, and I just think we have to. I feel like I made a commitment to people to go with this 5-year plan to show that we're serious about it. I don't know what's going to happen in 2 years. You know what happens. None of us may be here in 2 years or whatever the time frame is, and people may take another look and say, hey, we never promised anybody, and I just, even though I understand exactly what you're saying, I am committed to the 5-year because I think it's so necessary to get it done. But I understand your point. I do.
Public discussion?
I could offer you just a couple of things. I think Mary made one point that I want to be clear, is that we have to do it for at least 2 years, because we have to plan 2 years out. That's, the roads for next year are already planned, they're done, ordered, measured, so we can't do this on an annual basis. And I think the uncertainty to the public if you did it annually, so I'm glad that you're not even considering the annual side of that. To give you some comfort, if you decide to do it all, this is going to be a debt authorization, and just like with Lincoln School Apartments, every year you're going to have to decide how much money is spent on the debt, and if you feel in 2 years finances aren't good, then you just don't authorize that program that year. So I've been thinking too about the split, and I've heard from some members of advisory that they're concerned about the size. I'm a little concerned about splitting that list in half somewhere, and people feeling like, wait a second, my road's not on it, my road's on it, and I think that might be a little problematic for people, and I think it might draw us apart a little bit. So I think you can achieve the results that you're looking for, Mary, and do the same thing that you're looking for, Paul, just by controlling it each year. You're going to also have to decide the repayment schedule, too, through that process, so that'll allow you to figure out how much you want to spend on a given year. We've also been told that we might be getting some more money from the state for road building. If we do, then that might be a way for us to ameliorate the amount we draw down in the borrowing.
Thank you, Tim.
Okay. I suppose my opinion here. I always took great pride in the roads that I approved, only because I wanted them to last a very long time. And I'm persuaded that the concept of, what do they call that, a surge? A surge in road building efforts will bring our roadway generally up to good as opposed to fair. So I'd be inclined to adopt the formula in toto as opposed to sequentially.
Okay.
Entertain a motion?
Let's do it.
I'll make a motion for favorable action on Article V.
And do we need to say?
Not to exceed.
Yeah, we have to say a number here. in
Oh,
this case.
sorry. I apologize, but
2.4?
Yeah.
not to,
242.
2.242. Right.
2.242
Thank you, Tom.
million.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
And Article Z,
See.
the Harbor Park and the Harbor Park project and building. I'll let you know that I'm making a presentation along with Roger, so I think some members of the trustees and the Harbor Development might join us in Gloucester next week to the Seaport Bond Council, and we've received some pretty favorable information from them regarding a grant for this building. So,
Without getting too deep into that, is that something that's been decided, or is it just preliminary? Or?
I'm not sure. I really would rather go to that meeting and find out, but I heard some very positive information about it. Hopefully we'll have a really good announcement for the town soon. I think you guys have to start thinking about, the issue of where in your parcel and those issues. But I think you can still move forward with this regardless.
And if we move forward in Article Z, there will still be permitting so that citizens who have a point of view about the location can still participate.
Correct. And I think ultimately you're going to have to decide where you want this to go to, whether it's on their land or on your land. So that's part of that process too.
But we're not, by committing to Article Z, we're not committing to the location necessarily in the drawings that were shown to us.
Correct.
Does this preclude future grant submittals with respect to the harbor for other projects?
Absolutely not. We have several in front of them. So expect we'll continue to.
So a like activity could be applied for?
Oh, yes. As we continue on with the harbor plan, if that's how the town proceeds, I would suspect that at every step of the way, we'd be looking at Seaport Bond Council funding or other funding that comes available to us.
Would the Seaport Council entertain proposals with respect to seawall and wharf repairs?
Yeah, I'm not sure whether or not that's their area. I'm not as familiar with the Seaport. It's the harbor master and Roger are working a little more closely on that. I know we've been talking to them about all of the accoutrements to the harbor, the walkways and the bridge and those type of issues. I'm not sure whether or not, for example, the ramp and the parking lot is not them. That's a different state agency. So I could look into that and get back to you on that.
Okay. You have a motion?
Make a motion for favorable action on Article Z.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and then double A.
And double A allows you to enter into a lease for the property and allows us to go through the general court petitioning, because this will be an Article 97 land if you move it to your property. If you don't, then you won't. I don't think you'll need this article, but we'll have it in case.
So it allow us to enter into lease with the tenant for,
This allows you to enter into lease, but also, this is petitioning the general court to allow us to, this is the so-called Article 97.
Right.
They have to approve the reuse of land within that designation. You can't just go out and lease it or do anything with it without getting legislative approval. So
Right.
that's what, actually, this is not, this is allowing us to go through that process and addressing the lease issue.
I just wanted so the folks at home knew that,
Correct. I think we're still in the mindset that we'd like to lease that facility out, ultimately, and not run it ourselves.
I think it's going to be real important as these move along to try to get some visibility and exposure to location, size. I think a lot of people are going to have a lot of strong opinions about it.
Correct. And while it is the selectmen's parcel, I think we've asked that a lot of that activity happen in harbor development.
Sure.
And in trustees, and I know that they're going to have quite a bit of meetings, and we'll advertise as heavily as we can.
Okay, we ready to
entertain a
vote?
motion.
Sure.
I make a motion for favorable action on Article AA.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Moving on.
I think you're into appointments and
Appointments.
selectmen and town administrator reports.
Okay.
And you have to, a vote of, are we doing the warrant? I don't think we are, right?
No,
No.
we're not.
We have a vote here to appoint Robin McGuire to the ZBA to fill an unexpired term ending June 30th, 2018. Todd McGrath, who has served the town superbly, both in his capacity as a planning board member and as a member of the ZBA, has tendered a resignation as a regular member due to professional constraints. So just, Todd, thank you so much for the work that you've done over the years. It's been invaluable. Robin McGuire is an attorney who serves presently as an alternate.
Oh, okay, good. I honestly
Yeah.
didn't know much about it, so
Yeah.
I was trying to get some sense of it.
Well, that's why I want to
Thank
talk
you.
to you and tell
Yep.
you. I spoke, she works at Nutter. And
She's
she-
already on then as an alternate, right?
She is, and she's been highly praised as very capable, very competent, and she'd make an excellent addition to the regular members of the ZBA. I spoke to her and asked her if she was interested in being considered, and she said she felt privileged and honored to be considered. So that's where we are.
Do we normally, and I don't remember appointing somebody to that board per se, maybe Custard and those guys, folks have been there for a while, but do we normally look to the alternate to step in? Is that kind of the normal progression?
I'm not sure whether that's a prerequisite, but, I mean, she certainly has familiarity with a lot of the projects before the board now, so there's a logical
Right.
connection to, bumping her up.
I just, for some reason, not having familiarity with that scenario, I just seemed to make sense to me that if somebody was an alternate, they were envisioned somewhere down the line to be a full member. I just wondered if that
Unless we
was...
had a superstar come out of left field or something, but, I mean, yeah, I agree with you.
Okay.
You want to do a
I
motion?
would, yeah, and I would thank Robin for not only her past service, but continued service, and also thank Todd McGrath for
Oh, yeah.
the many, many contributions to the town. I'll make a motion to appoint Robin S. McGuire to the Zoning Board of Appeals to fill an unexpired term ending June 30th, 2018.
I'll second it. And I just want to make one comment. I've come to know Todd a little bit, probably not as well as other people, but his reputation precedes him. I will say that we want to thank him for all the service he's provided to this town, and we'll miss his presence.
And we'll try to rope you back in once you get a little time to breathe here, guy. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, welcome, Ms. McGuire. Okay, so we're slowly chipping away at the appointments, I'm happy to say.
Yep.
Keep looking at it. Okay, and the town administrator has left the room, so we don't have him. Is there anything that either one of you would like to say or add before we adjourn to executive session?
No.
I don't have anything to say either, so on that note, I'll entertain a motion to go into executive session to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property, Boston Golf, because discussion of this matter in open session may have a detrimental effect of the negotiating position of the town. We will not return to open session.
So moved.
Yeah. Do you need a roll call?
I do.
Aye.
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 Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Aye, thank you.